Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Angles and Attitudes. John, how you doing?
I'm doing really good tonight, and I am looking forward to this one, Mark.
Today, we kind of go off topic. Today, we're going to dip our toe into some topics and some areas we haven't done before, because we're very happy to be joined by a man who knows his way around the courtroom and around the chamber of City Hall in Chicago. We're joined today by former Alderman and attorney Robert Fioretti. Bob, thanks for joining us and welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me, both of you.
Thank you, Bob.
It is definitely our pleasure. So we got to make sure that we give as much time to our guests as possible. There's so much to cover. We're going to start with mom and dad, Polish and Italian immigrants, and let you kind of tell the story from there, because John and I are in that 60 plus range, and we relate to grandparents or parents who are coming from immigrant backgrounds, and how your success story started.
Well, thanks, Mark. I have to tell you, my dad came off the boat, came through Ellis Island, and he was 7 years old when he arrived here. He was much older. He was older than my mother, and I was third in line of the children to be born. But, I always think about when they came across in 1911, 1912, what it must have been like for somebody to, a 7-year-old and just leave, and a family leaving your home, coming to America because they believed in the American dream. And anything was possible here, and anything still is possible here, I do believe. But, they were only here with the clothes on their back, and they came to Chicago, settled on the far south side, settled in the Pullman neighborhood. And I grew up in Roseland, Pullman neighborhood. My dad worked for the Pullman Company. He later on went to work for Standard Oil at the time, and then started his own company. I am honored to have the name Fioretti, though. Fioretti means little flower. And that came about because my grandfather was from Padua, and the major orphanage there, he was found in a field of little flowers. And so they gave him the name Fioretti for their last name. It's interesting on how we all come here, who we are. But my dad had a story. My grandmother lived into late 1970s. So I went to a small school, St. Anthony of Padua, on the south side in the Kensington neighborhood. My mother, though, she's Polish. She was actually born here shortly after her folks arrived here, and born in Wausau, Wisconsin. I think they must have heard the name. It was Polish, so they thought, and they ended up going there, So, but when the two married, it was I think the grandparents didn't want to talk to the Polish side, and the Polish side didn't want to talk to the Italian side.
Bob, I want to ask you a question in regards to Dad. You said did he start a business? Did you get this great work ethic? I know we're going to lead into that with Mark. Did you get this great work ethic from Dad and Mom? I mean, was it something that you like, hey, want to be like him? Where did this all kind of stem from?
Well, I think the answer is yes. And a lot of my staff folks have always said, boy, you have a work ethic, and they have all used it themselves too, to do what needs to be done, no matter how small the task is or how large. We're always willing to tackle it. And yes, my mother was a nurse in the Roseland Hospital, and my dad actually went to go visit a friend of his that was hurt, and she was on the floor, caring for this guy. And sure enough, they hit it off, and they got married, and 4 kids later, and here we all are in the beautiful city of Chicago or the surrounding area. So yes,
It's
Yes.
interesting that you say that because I'm Polish and Italian, and we had North Side Polish with my dad, and my wife is Italian and Polish. And it was funny when I would, with my wife's side of the family, South Side Polish, Berwyn, Cicero, North Side Italian, and God bless him, my father-in-law is 91 years old, is first generation. And just what you talk about and what John talks about, that I think without getting too far, into the weeds right away, is that work ethic with those people come from. And there's those little things, Bob, that like to this day, God love him, he lives in an assisted living, and we have 3 buckets of butter tabs because Papa will not throw those out. Being an immigrant, right? You had what you had on your back, and whatever you were given to eat, you didn't waste it. Even if you saved it, you saved it for another day. And even my parents are in their 80s, and every time we go to eat, there's always a styrofoam container that comes back, no matter how small the portion is, right? Even the tomatoes and the lettuce, because when you were growing up, you took nothing for granted.
Right.
And, there's sometimes my kids in their late 20s now look at that and make, chuckle. And I'm like, you guys don't understand and don't get it. And sometimes that's what misses in those generations, right? About being grateful for what you have, appreciating it. And to your point, Bob and John, the work ethic necessary to achieve that, right?
Well, you said a word, grateful, and sometimes so many people nowadays are not grateful, and they just want a handout instead, and don't realize all the things that they can do by themselves, or what they need to do and how they can do it. And being grateful is a word that we all need to find meaning in. So I agree.
No,
Bob
and
I was gonna ask Mark, Bob, was the law pursuit always kind of a passion, or was it something that, how did it come about? Because I gotta be honest, my dad always says, John, you have the gift to gab. I go, but Dad, I'm not smart in school. So I've always been I'm always enamored by the lawyer because, you had to study and you had to, really hit the books. How does this come about? We'll start with the law part of it first.
How about thank God for Perry Mason?
Watch them a lot.
There you go. Growing up watching Perry Mason, and but I always felt the need to give back to the community, whatever my community was, and I think my folks had that same attitude. They were always involved. They did things, whether it was a church, some charitable organizations, even then. And we had things that were a lot different as all of us growing up. It wasn't big money companies coming in and flushing out, but we all had the small areas of charities, church, and helping those that needed it. And I see the profession of law as helping those that need it. I went into this profession and to help other people, and it's carried over to this day.
it's interesting in that your definition of being a lawyer obviously is different, or it was a means to an end to be able to help other people out. And as I get older, and as John and I get older, you look for more ways now. You kind of made your way, right? The kids are out, and now it's like, okay, you begin, and obviously your legacy is amazing, but how do you make your legacy, your personal legacy? How are people's lives different as a result of you being involved in their lives? Like you said, whether it's through charitable operations or through the church, or just those types of things that when you can look back and go, you know what, somebody's life, and in your case, the scale of it with, potentially litigation or getting people, who were wrongly accused and getting justice for those people. The level of satisfaction is something that John and I can't, obviously understand. Can you share something like that? That's, we talked about the Cubs before we came on, but is that hitting the home run in the bottom of the ninth and a walk-off win, and the energy and the joy around being able to get somebody out who's been wrongly accused.
Well, I think both of you know the Italian word for lawyer is avvocato, meaning advocate. So, and I think that it had a meaning for me. I saw it. I remember growing up, a couple of instances of like the girl next door, a couple years older, but she was being bullied all the time by somebody. And I remember at the time I heard something and I went out there and she was basically crying as this, and she was in high school. I was in grade school still, but she was being bullied by a young kid. And I got into a fight with him, and I remember my dad looking out, but I got the worst end of the fight, but he never bothered that girl again. I had the same thing growing up in high school. You know, we had a changing neighborhood. Mendel, which was a Catholic high school, was our second year. It was in a religion class, and somebody sprouted off and said something, the N-word to an African-American kid in the class. And I said, don't say that. And he continued to say it again and again. And the next thing I know is we're both on the floor. And I'm looking up and we're both looking up, and it's a priest, and, you know, saying, what is going on here? 5 days of jug at Mendel Catholic High School was, you had to stay silent then. And, you know, it's things like that that impact you, and what you do and who you are. And, you know, and I grew up in a family. My mother was tolerant. She allowed us to express our beliefs. And, you know, when I was growing up, it was the time of the anti-war movement, and being in high school as it was happening, and going to college at the end. And I was lucky to, I actually planned on going to an East Coast college, and I worked 2 jobs during that summer. And I thought, whoa. And all of a sudden in August comes around, and I said, and I'm tired, 2 full-time jobs. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They were going to help me. I had a small scholarship, and I looked back and it was like, whoa, I'm going to have to work the same way next summer and the following summer. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to go to University of Illinois instead. It's nearby, and it's a lot. I don't want to say cheaper, because often the educational opportunities are the same. And I ended up going to the University of Illinois, having almost some of that same attitude that we saw then.
You weren't afraid to intimidate the intimidator. That's for sure.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
take them on.
You talk about, I'm fascinated listening to the story in your demeanor. And then I ask myself, how does that demeanor survive as an alderman with what you see portrayed of the aggression and the conditions being involved with Chicago City Council and the cutthroat and all the stories around that? How did that kind of set in your ability to be successful in that setting, not having that, what would have seemed to be that aggressive me first attitude that seems to be portrayed, that you see a lot in the media, and we'll, you know, leave that for as it's portrayed. Let's put it that way.
A good question, because in the years that I have not been in the council, I've seen a transition to everybody is fighting each other, and, you know, they're FU has become a common word, from our mayor saying it to President Trump, to, you know, total disrespect for people. And even in the city council as it is now, they call each other names and whatnot. But I you know, I have seen, when I came in, I knew what the system was about. And I was an anti-corruption candidate then, just as I am now. And I knew they were going to mute my voice, which, prohibited me from, collecting campaign dollars and cents in a good legal way. And at the same time, if you don't have money, it's hard to run in this whole system. I think we all have come to realize it's big dollars and cents. Can you imagine if both Pritzker and Griffin have been spending money on charities, or they could probably pave every street in the city of Chicago right now.
Sure.
It's so out of control, so out of control. But you need to stand up for basic values, values of honesty and integrity, people that can move forward. I mean, I have to tell you, I ran for alderman on one issue way back. I'm reading the Chicago Tribune, and there was a story in the bottom half about how few African-American kids went to college, graduating out of CPS. And I walk out my house, and I guarantee I can, if I stood in the middle of the street, I can swing a club, and I'm not that good at golfing, but I can hit Whitney Young. I can look the other way, and it's a 7-minute walk to Crane High School, one of the best schools in the country. And at that time, it was in the top 100, and one of the more challenging urban schools a few blocks away from my house. Why? And I ran on education. But then I got into a big cluster of one of the most diverse wards in terms of African-American populations, very limited white populations. And I had to go door to door, and I went door to door to hear the concerns of the people. And we had more issues on development. And when you get to the city council, you realize you have zero effect on education. They have an education chair who has a staff, and they barely meet. And what do they talk about? They don't even have an impact. I had more schools in my ward than any other ward at the time. I had more senior homes, more parks. And I did a lot of things for the schools. I made sure I got money both from the state, and I knew how to get down to the state of Illinois and make sure and talk to my state senators, state reps, to get money for all the schools, and how to use the TIF programs to put money into the schools. And at the same time, I looked at what needed to be done in terms of development and making it a control that the people of the area had a voice in what should go on in development. And I always enjoy looking out my house and seeing what we did in the second ward for the city of Chicago and for the people. I planted more trees than any other alderman, probably 1,300 trees at one. I think I planted in this ward. Built more parks than any other alderman, and with community input into each and every one of them.
Staying on this theme of the city council that we just brought up, here's the craziest question of the night. Since the days of Richard J. Daley, the original, to now, are the changes, Bob, in this city just like rampant when it comes to politics? I mean, is it a totally different structure, or are you in the trenches every day?
Well, I walk down the street and I hear the voice of people all the time, and they come up to me, and it's unfortunate. Aldermen, first of all, I think we have way too many aldermen. LA is above us, and they have more people, and they only have 15. Houston is biting on our butts in terms of population, and they have 15. They're able to make it, but I have talked to a number of aldermen that would be willing to reduce the size probably to 35, not to 25. And we certainly, I would go into City Hall almost every Sunday and read everything that was coming into the committees, or what was going to be before the city council that Wednesday or whatever it was, and make sure I was well educated. The last day of my 8 years in the city council, I heard it from a couple of aldermen, and they said, you were the hardest working alderman we've ever had. Aldermen make a lot of money. It should be a full-time job. I did practice law at the same time, but I would go into the law office twice a week, all in the afternoon to make sure things were, there, whatever cases that we had. But it is a full-time job. Driving around my ward, I would make it from, let's say, Lake and Sacramento, all the way downtown and then into Bronzeville. I would try to drive every street once a week, and see what was on, to make sure services. We pay the highest taxes in this, I think almost in the country, and we should have the highest and best services, period.
What my dad was a teacher in the Chicago public school system for over 30 years. So you touched a nerve there in terms of education and how important. And I watched my dad's struggles as the schools began to deteriorate, as somebody who was passionate, because he was a teacher. And I know growing up as a kid of a teacher, you were told come August, we had to start saving because every other year there was going to be a strike, right? I tell my children now about some of those things. And I'm like, Dad, you're crazy. That never happened. I'm like, no, my son played travel hockey and we were fortunate enough to go to every tournament. And I said, I tried to play travel hockey just like John, and we didn't go to every tournament. And my son was like, well, why, Dad? And I said, because if the tournaments were early in the year and Dad was on strike, we were buying groceries and we didn't have money to go wherever to travel, because he wanted to be a teacher because he was passionate about it. And the question is, and you brought it up, is how can something seemingly so fundamental that applies in all the wards as a way to begin to set a foundation to get out of those lives of poverty and violence, and how does that not find its way to the top throughout the agendas of the aldermen? I'm just, maybe there isn't an answer to that, but you from the outside, you struggle with how that couldn't be one of the number one things.
Well, and it should be. And I made sure I would visit my schools quarterly, every one of them. And I would also have a principal's breakfast every quarter. I was lucky, and I am really disappointed that aldermen haven't followed up on it. But we created, and I remember it was Lincoln's birthday, which was a holiday, but we had a principal's breakfast that day, and it was at one of the museums. And at that time, we discussed creating the ambassadorship, that if a school, let's say any one of them wanted to pick up the phone and, oh yeah, can you bring out artifacts? And they would come out to the school. Or if can we bring all of our kids to the museum and to the museum campus? And they all agreed, and we started doing that for a while. I really think kids, even nowadays, even with the violence that they see and the almost the how it's ripping apart our social fabric of a lot of the kids. I mean, you can ask kids in some of these neighborhoods, do you know somebody that's shot in your family? And you'll see a bunch of hands go up. Do you know somebody else? And you before you know it, you have 50-60% of the hands in some of these classes up, and it's impacting on these kids. I brought kids. I had a regular trip to the Sears Tower, which is sometimes some of us still call it the Sears Tower, and to look out. And I remember watching these kids, and they never made it, from some of the neighborhoods, and the awe on their face, and they would just look around up there and say, and you can tell the excitement that they want to learn, that they want to do something, that's why, quite frankly, I made it for their fathers and uncles to make sure that every time we have jobs opening in our community, that we would hire from the community. I brought 8,000 jobs to the community and hired from the community. So I think those things are important. People want to do things. I look out my window here, and I remember a couple of times I had drug dealers in front of my house, and they would come up to me and say, "Alderman, I can't keep this going. I've got a couple of kids. Can you help me find a job?" And or my wife and I would be on our bikes on a very early in the morning, maybe on the far west side, and stop by a group of people and say, "Hey, can you get us a job?" And she remembers it well, I know. So people want to do better. I mean, and we see it, but we have to offer them the opportunity of education. We have to offer them the opportunity of having a good job and a living wage. This is an expensive city now. Taxes are going, property taxes are just driving everybody. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So,
Bob, if job creation and education, if everybody had that same mindset like you, we probably wouldn't have all the problems that we're having now after COVID and just before pre-COVID. So I know this has been your forte, just as you being the civil rights lawyer.
and I agree. I do think it is, if we can, and somebody had something on, one of the mayoral candidates said, "Oh yeah, the casino ought to, we have to hire locally and we have an ordinance on the books about, I can't recall if it's like over 100,000 a project, or maybe it's 1 million, but we have to hire 50% of the people from the city. So let's start enforcing our ordinances instead of allowing everybody come in from Indiana and Michigan. And I do know they come in that far to get a good job here, and they drive home every night. So we need to do better.
And they take their disposable income and spend it in another border. So then you lose sales tax revenue and all of those other things, and it just spirals from there. And the I didn't know about it. That's a really neat program, the ambassadorship, or also being able to bring people in, because kids, again, the education thing with my dad being a teacher for so long, of, well, why do we need to be here? Well, here are examples of success, and people to be able to come and visit and talk to the kids in those school settings to say, you are important, and being in school is important because you can achieve. And that's just, it's wonderful. And obviously your passion around it was so strong that you ran for mayor, and, obviously those didn't work out, but talk to us a little bit about the ideas behind it, where did you just get fed up and say there's only one way to fix this, and I got to be the leader of this city? Or talk to us a little bit about, the energy around that.
Well, and I did see it. I saw what was happening in the city council, and I saw what was the perception of how we were leading this city, and I saw communities falling further and further behind. I grew up in the Roseland Pullman area, and I was I lived down in Pullman way back when, to have a city job many years ago. But if you drive around the city, you can see the dichotomy of what happens in some of these areas. And I thought at the time, in fact, I know I could do better. I know I can bring a coalition of people together, how we tackle the problems from all communities, and how people have an understanding to work cooperatively together instead of pounding on the tables, finger pointing, and it's somebody else's fault. No, I remember one of our noted columnists came up to me one day and said, "Yeah, don't you want to blame Daley for this?" And I said, "No, I'm going to blame everybody for it, all the aldermen and everybody else." Well, no, I want you to blame Daley. No, it's everybody's fault because we've tolerated this and we've tolerated the violence in the city. And then all of a sudden, everybody's all getting super excited about it because thanks to these things, we know what's happening in real time. So, it's time for us to work together to find solutions, and we can. And I believe in the goodness. I think when we were all growing up, we had a shared optimism about our city, our state, our country. Well, that's all gone now. And so we have to bring it back. And I do believe in the goodness of people.
How do we cultivate that? Because there's a central issue, Bob, and obviously it's not an easy answer, but it's no longer respectful to have a difference of opinion, to be able to sit across the table, like you just said, without somebody pounding or wanting to point a finger or blame and say, there is a problem. We both have to take accountability for the problem. We both have different approaches, but there's no longer, hey, I see your way, you see my way. Now let's try to build that consensus that puts us in a direction to be able to solve the issue. There's now, everybody's either a winner or a loser, right? And you can't win in the big picture with that being the case.
Well, I think that is a good question, but again, it boils down to this: everybody can do things on Twitter, on Facebook, and all these other social media, and about destroying somebody behind their back, and the lies that are perpetuated about individuals. I can't remember how it goes, but a lie can get halfway around the world even before somebody puts their pants on. So
this phone now has become the first impression, exactly, for everyone to see. And this is going to be really hard to overcome if we're going to unite as one, like you're saying, correct?
Mm-hmm. And I think we see it in this gubernatorial race. These commercials are already backstabbing everybody, and there's no honest approach, no integrity even behind them, and they just go ahead and just say whatever you want. We need to, and again, it boils down to education and the family structure, which is lacking in so many of our communities right now. But it's generational on what's happened, and I'm not saying everybody needs to have a stable father, mother, all in the same roof, but people need to understand that young men and women and need to know and listen to their fathers and mothers. And their fathers and mothers have to take an interest in these kids, and in the school. I mean, they should know. I started Operation Safe Passage on a shooting down at Crane, and now it's pretty spread across the city. But we did it for free. We had pastors, police, and parents walk their kids to school. Now they're all getting paid, okay, which is fine, if that's the only way we can get them. But we need our kids to have a better understanding of the value of education. I taught last semester at the NIU Law School, and it was all by Zoom, and you can see the problems that Zoom has. And the disconnect of many of the students on what they're doing. I think we've lost a lot with our younger generation of both grade school, high school, and college kids who for 2 years, all they did was be on Zoom. And they've lost a lot in terms of educational ability.
And it feeds into what you were talking about, because as a immigrant family, and even for me being second generation, your family was everything. And those 4 blocks around your family, right? Your grocery, your barber, your gas station, and your church were all,
Yeah,
and in a lot of cases,
Right, yeah.
my grandfather, bless his soul, used to work for DuPont Paint over there off of the Kennedy, and they lived at Marshfield in Ashland. And so there was a 5 block radius. I mean, almost to the point,
yeah,
right, where you cashed your check at the local tavern.
right.
And
Yeah,
it didn't
yeah.
always make and I was 5 years old sitting on a bar stool, drinking orange soda and yo-yo potato chips. But that's the element I grew up in. But I knew my grandfather, I knew my grandmother, I knew my great grandmother, and she tried to teach me the language, and my parents. And so all of those people were around you and shaped your development and didn't let you get outside of that. And so there was respect for your mom and dad, and respect for what your dad said or what your mother said. And you're right, that's lost. And I think that's a big underpinning that somehow we have to work back towards. I'm a big Notre Dame guy, and Lou Holtz said, one of the greatest gifts that you can get, a father can give a son, is to love his mother and just show the proper example. And that goes a long way in that development. And also, yeah, those are strong, seemingly not too technical or difficult issues, but they're driving a lot of what goes on in our city and our country that's taken in the wrong direction.
And it has become unfortunate in terms of how some lack of family structure has, I don't even know where to begin when we look at it. But we need to restore that. We need to restore respect. We need to restore faith in our communities, the faith itself. You know, I'm all of us have some belief here in God, and we need to teach that, and we need to bring it forward to people.
Do you foresee these changes, Robert? I mean, just like the night when I met you, and my wife says to me, "You're going to go up to Robert Fioretti. He doesn't even know you." I go, "The worst thing that's going to happen here is no." But I went up to you out of respect, not just to get you on this program, but it was out of respect because I knew of your career. I knew what you've done in the city and what you're trying to do. But do you foresee this in the future? We can have this respect.
Well, I think what I see out there is people, the pendulum has swung so far one way. And it has, and then coupled with the pandemic and COVID being here, and people are readjusting themselves. Your home now is what? Your office, your gym, you know, it's everything at this point. And I think a lot of families are reconnecting in terms of the struggle that they've had. Everybody's out there trying to make a living. Fathers are one. Let's say you have a regular dual family. The father's working, the mother's working, nobody's taking care of the kids, or what the case may be. Single family, you have great grandmothers taking care of the kids. But I think it may be the time that it's bringing people back together. And I hope that's true. You know, I see what happens downtown. I only live, you know, a mile and a half from downtown. I know the problem areas of downtown and when to avoid them. And I'm surprised that our law enforcement people don't see it the same way, but they should be out there. But these kids all need opportunity. They need education. They need a job. I met a client at the Billy Goat here down in Madison on Saturday. And he had gotten into some trouble, but he was taking care of a good kid, taking care of both of his nephews. One was 8 and the other was 5. But they knew how to use this and play games like I never saw anybody playing games.
Incredible.
You know, and we all go to restaurants, and if we can still afford them at the rate it's going. But there, how many couples are on the phone and on a date or whatever, and they're on their phones?
No,
For
it's a double-edged sword on so many levels because, like I said, my parents 82 and 84, and we're living in our old neighborhood. So during COVID, that was our connection. If I could finally
Mhm.
figure out, how to show my dad to do FaceTime, we could, I got to see his top of his head for the first couple of times, but we finally got to see him. The grandkids talked them through it. But then just to your other point, you can go to a restaurant and mom and dad may be talking, but the younger two have the screen and they're watching movies and the whole family is together, but nobody's talking. And where
Right.
we were prior to that, as our kids were growing up, and I know I spent more money than I should, but we would go to a restaurant, no phones, no TV, no radio, and everybody once a week, we had to check in with each other and talk to each other about what was going on. There was no distraction. Give me the
Right.
remote, change the channel or whatever. We're going to go to Red Robin and it's just the four of us for an hour, whether you like it or not, we're going to do that. But the COVID, like you talked about, there was probably some benefit because families have to spend more time together and understand. And for a while there, that's all you had was family. So hopefully there may be some residue of that that will carry over to the unit and respect for what goes on out there. So.
And I sure hope so, because otherwise we're lost as a country. And it's important to know our history and who we are, where we all came from, our own history of this country, what it was founded on, our city neighborhoods, what they were, and we can restore the greatness of what we need to do here.
Bob, are you still in heavy practice with law nowadays? Are you still at it a lot?
Only about 10 to 12 hours a day. So I actually just,
So you're cutting
I
back.
just got home.
It's out.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. You're
So-
cutting back. You're cutting back, huh?
Yes. Doing, still doing some civil rights, still doing some other cases representing municipalities. I have a couple of class actions on red light camera tickets and a few other. I'm heavily involved on refinancing some small suburbs that have their bonds in default. So I have a very variety of a practice that people sometimes say, how do you do it? And I find ways to do it. And I serve both on the Chicago Bar Association Board of Managers, and I'm a member of the Illinois State Bar General Assembly, which keeps me informed on changes that are happening in the law, both especially down in Springfield, and how that affects all of us. And we get to comment on legislation that's going through and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Well, John, you asked that question, and in doing my research and all, I found a quote from Bob from when he did dual commencement from 2020 and 2021, and he talked to the class about being an agent of change, be true to yourself and to your passions. And I would think that those three things are great motivators and signposts for Bob to use to go from 10 hours to 12 hours for those things that he finds passionate and wants to be an agent of change in with regards to his law practice. So we thank you for that and trying to share that with that next generation. And if only a small percentage of that takes and pays homage and heed to that, we're going to be okay. So we thank you for that. So
thank you. Thanks for letting me be here too. Great evening.
hey, so we didn't talk sports. Holy macro, we went 46 minutes without talking sports. So we have to have you back to talk about the Cubs and Harry Carey and Billy Goat and all of that. But our tradition here is John's a hockey goalie. So we defer to the goalie. The goalie gets the last question of the Angles and Attitudes podcast. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
You got it. Bob, I really want to thank you here for coming on. I know we had met a little over a month ago when I came up to you, and I thought maybe you were going to look at me and say, well, who are you? But it was the total opposite. What we talked about here tonight, I saw in you in that one night. And usually I, get a call into Mark and I said, Mark, you're not going to believe we're probably going to have Robert Fioretti on our program. And again, just all the things you've done from, being with the council, involved in the political here in Chicago, which is crazy. And of course, being the lawyer that you are, the only thing that I know about you is that it's always been for the good of what you do every day. I have to tell you, your name in Italian, yes, means the little flower. Fioretti is the pronunciation of your name. But my friend, I have to tell you, you're nothing about a little flower. You will take on a lot of imaginable sizes. And I truly, truly appreciate you coming on, and would like to read your book, if it's possible, and if it's still out there, My Cancer Journey, because I know you're a survivor of that. And I've only heard from other people that it is a fantastic read. So again, Robert Fioretti, thanks for coming on with Mark and I on Angles and Attitude. This was truly an honor tonight.
It was good to be here. I really enjoyed it too. So,
Hey, we appreciate it. Stay well, enjoy the summer, and we will have you back after the Cubs lose 100 games this year. We could talk about that. How's that?
yeah. Well, let's see what they do this coming weekend. They're playing the White Sox. So
They're going down, Bob. They're going down. I'm a Sox fan.
You hit a
Well,
nerve.
the
You
White
hit a
Sox
nerve.
did. They came from. They really did a job up in New York. That was
Yeah.
for sure. Whew.
That 76-year-old manager might be turning heads now. We'll see.
I one last thing. I had the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame had a dinner in December, the first weekend of December, and Tony was being honored, and he and I had a little time to chat and about the season, and he was just like, he was so disappointed that they didn't go further, and he said, we're going to make it this year. So I'm crossing my fingers there. How was that?
I will be back on in October when they're in the playoffs then. How's that? We'll make a date.
You got it. You're on, guys.
All right,
Thanks.
stay well.
Thank you,
you.
Robert. Thank you so much.
All right, bye.